Ever get that feeling?
Which one? There's so many.
You know, that profound sort of complex internal hum where you feel incredibly rich on the inside.
Right.
A layered identity, deep interests, opinions on the subtle differences between different historical eras, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. The high-resolution internal experience.
Exactly. But the moment you try to communicate any of that depth to the outside world, you struggle.
It's like the world is moving way too fast. It's demanding the 2-second summary of your soul.
Yes. And it leaves almost all of the truth on the cutting room floor.
It really is the defining paradox of the modern self, and it is exhausting. I mean, internally, you are a walking ecosystem.
A walking ecosystem. I like that.
Yeah, it's a high-resolution experience, right? With fluctuating moods, competing values, a really dense base of knowledge. But external communication, it always demands distillation.
Simplification.
Simplification, compression, all for speed and legibility. And the friction from that mismatch, I mean, between your internal depth and that external demand for simplicity, that's it. That is where the pain of modern connection really lies.
That's it right there. And that struggle to find genuine resonance, to find acceptance for your deepest interests and your true sense of self in what feels like a really fragmented, fast-paced culture. That's the core tension we're exploring today. So our mission in this deep dive is to synthesize a pretty vast collection of sources. We've got insights from philosophy, cognitive science, neuropsychology, relational theory,
and modern cultural analysis, which is crucial.
All to give you, the listener, a kind of robust map. We're here to help you navigate this incredibly complex terrain of the modern self.
And we've analyzed insights that really touch upon these profound psychological and cultural pressures that make true connection feel so elusive.
It really does.
The whole challenge, the big one, is bridging that gap. How do you take a deep, nuanced, sometimes contradictory internal self and express it in a way that, finds acceptance, finds understanding in a world that often just prefers the surface?
And it's not just about efforts, is it?
No, not at all. It requires intentionality. Real conscious intentionality.
Okay, let's unpack this architecture of depth then, starting right inside our own heads. You mentioned that feeling of being a walking paradox.
Right.
The experience of having these deeply competing internal parts, and with it, this deep longing for emotional resonance that goes way beyond just intellectual understanding. We don't just want people to get us. We want them to feel us.
That is a key distinction right there. We so often assume that if someone just understands the logic of our feelings, then, the connection is complete.
Right. Check the box. They understood me.
Exactly. But the sources we looked at, they really highlight that the deep self is inherently layered. It's messy. It leads to all this internal noise. I mean, one part of you might crave safety and security, while another part is desperate for radical adventure.
And those aren't defects.
Not at all. They're just competing energy systems. And so the proposal from the sources is that we address this internal complexity, not by trying to flatten it to make it simple,
but by using a cognitive tool.
Precisely. A cognitive tool, the subpersonality model.
So it's a language, essentially, a way to talk about it.
It's a language. It's not about seeing these inner facets or archetypes as literal separate beings that need therapy. It's more of a narrative tool, a system of names to manage that internal noise, those fluctuations, and those really layered currents of thought.
By naming the patterns, you get some clarity. You get some control over the chaos.
You do.
I have to say, I love the metaphor provided in the source material because it makes this pretty abstract idea feel so immediate.
Oh, the stream metaphor. It's great.
Yeah. Max is the mainstream. And the subpersonalities, Liz, Bannock, Devin, Kelly, Tira, Fallon, they're the springs that feed it. It externalizes that internal dialogue.
And think about the practical application of that for a second. If you suddenly feel murky or confused or paralyzed, maybe intensely anxious, you can stop. You can actually pause and ask, which spring is feeding me this energy right now?
Is this Liz, the fiercely ambitious competitive side?
Or is it Devin, the meticulously self-reliant perfectionist? Or, maybe it's Kelly, the nurturing cooperative caretaker.
Right.
Just naming the source of that current is the first step toward managing it. It moves you from that vague, I feel awful, to something much more specific, like, okay, my inner Devin is panicking about this deadline.
Which reframes the confusion, doesn't it? It becomes a solvable diagnostic problem. And this becomes so crucial when we look at that core conflict between competition and cooperation.
Hmm.
The goal isn't to silence the competitive springs, the Liz, the Devon, the Val within, but to develop what the sources called skillful agility.
And that is absolutely critical. We live in a society that so often frames competition as inherently bad, and cooperation as universally good.
Right. The default moral high ground.
But you need the assertiveness. You need the precise boundary setting and the relentless focus of your competitive side for execution, for achieving ambitious goals, for self-protection. If you're negotiating for a promotion, you need Liz or Devin at the mic.
But if you're trying to build a family or, say, a long-term business partnership, you need the compassion. You need the collective thinking and the patience of your Bannock or your Kelly or Kara.
Exactly. Skillful agility means knowing when to consciously pass that internal microphone. It all depends on whether the situation demands competition, that hard, sharp edge of the self, or collaboration, the softer, more integrated edge.
And the misalignment, the problems, they often come when we deploy the wrong inner spring for the wrong external task.
Using your competitive side on a cooperative partner, for instance, a classic recipe for disaster.
This whole architecture, it just immediately clarifies the challenge of trying to externalize that complex inner world. And here's where it really, really hits home for me.
Go on.
The realization that communication is fundamentally an act of distillation, not full expression. For a deeply layered internal world, that constant simplification must feel like an act of loss.
It is a profound, constant act of loss. I mean, imagine trying to describe a complex, multi-layered novel in a single tweet.
Can be done.
You can't. The listener or the reader, they can only absorb so much bandwidth at any given time. So you're forced to compress that massive, high-resolution inner experience, your internal ecosystem, into this tiny, legible thumbnail for the outside world.
And the source gave such a beautiful example of this. That externalizing sadness might be a representative emotion.
Yes.
It was a legible piece of a deeply illegible, complex internal whole. So if you're feeling, I don't know, a mixture of existential angst, professional burnout, and grief over a lost opportunity,
Yeah.
you just communicate the saddest.
Because that's the easiest emotion for someone else to register. It's a necessary strategy. It's not a sign of inauthenticity.
Right, you're not being fake.
No, you are translating the full symphony of your internal state into the single most accessible note. But the tragedy is that when the listener receives that single note, they often believe they've received the whole song.
And your inner world just remains unseen,
Yeah.
still illegible.
Still illegible.
And this inherent loss, this compression, it leads directly to the pain of misalignment in our relationships. We crave deep connection, but if we offer that genuine personal sharing, that one distilled piece of our complex inner world, and it's met with just surface-level acknowledgement,
The quick, cool text.
the quick cool or a default thumbs-up emoji,
Yeah.
it creates this deep and persistent pain.
It creates what the source has labeled asymmetry of perspectives. The person who's sharing is invested in the full depth of the experience, the context, the history, the emotional cost of that distillation process we just talked about.
Right, they've done the work.
They've done the work. But the friend, who is only receiving the thumbnail, is focused only on the surface of the emotion. Maybe they're even projecting their own insecurities, or just feeling overwhelmed.
So one person feels like they've invested major emotional capital.
And the other person feels like they've done their duty with minimal effort.
And that chronic feeling of misalignment is just so corrosive to relationships. It creates this huge imbalance in emotional labor.
Absolutely. When one person consistently invests deep emotional effort and vulnerability, and the other consistently offers only that surface acknowledgement, a profound sense of being unseen just takes root.
And where being unseen resides.
Quiet resentment builds over time. It is a silent poison in so many relationships.
And that quiet resentment, that feeling that your emotional energy isn't being reciprocated, it eventually forces an internal rebalancing, doesn't it?
It has to. You can't sustain pouring resources into a leaky bucket forever.
You just can't.
You can't. And this rebalancing, it's really an act of self-preservation. You have to protect your emotional resources. You have to adjust your expectations to match the reality of what that person is actually capable of offering consistently.
And the key point here, I think, is that setting boundaries isn't a punishment for the other person.
No, it's an act of self-acceptance and self-protection. It's about accepting reality without needing to turn the other person into a villain. It's about redirecting your most precious resources, your energy, your depth, your capacity for connection to people and projects where that depth will actually be valued.
That's a really powerful transition.
Mhm.
Understanding that internal language and the subsequent pain of distillation, it helps us see why in the external world we rely so heavily on cognitive shortcuts.
Exactly.
And that sets us up perfectly for Section 2, moving from our internal architecture to how we navigate cognitive shortcuts and language friction in a world outside our heads.
And our first tool for external clarity is a really remarkable framework for thinking. It's called the Kism model. Yeah.
REISM.
Right. This framework uses four linked but distinct concepts: knowledge, intelligence, smarts, and wisdom, to prevent us from mislabeling things and to promote a more accurate self-awareness. It forces us to separate the raw input from the processing, the immediate application, and the long-term discernment.
Okay, so let's nail down these definitions first. Knowledge is the raw material. It's the facts and data you know.
The vocabulary, historical dates, scientific formulas, what you learn in school, basically.
Okay, so then intelligence is the processing power. It's how you think.
It's the cold logic, the raw capacity of the mind to analyze, synthesize, and solve new problems. A brilliant strategist has high intelligence, whether they know a lot of facts or not.
Got it. Then we have smarts. This is how you act in the moment.
Yeah, the practical quick fixes, the ability to navigate a tricky social situation, negotiate a better deal, or, I don't know, fix a broken appliance with limited tools. We often call it street smarts.
Right. And finally, the highest level, wisdom. This is how you discern.
It incorporates judgment, ethics, long-term insight, and a real understanding of consequences. This is the quality that judges when and how to deploy your knowledge, intelligence, and smarts. And the sources were so vivid in describing how wisdom develops.
How so?
It's more like a permanent scar left by hard-won experience and reflection. It's not just another linear step you take.
That is a crucial distinction. Why is separating these four concepts so important for the listener trying to navigate their own complexity?
Because mislabeling obscures what really matters. It leads to flawed self-assessment and just poor decision-making. I mean, think about it. You might admire someone's extensive knowledge of finance and mistakenly call it wisdom.
And then find out they have terrible judgment when it comes to long-term ethics or even their own personal spending.
Exactly. Or you might see someone come up with quick, clever solutions, smarts, and confuse that with deep analytical intelligence.
The person who can fix the immediate crisis might not be the person who can design the system to prevent the next one.
Precisely. Distinguishing Kism helps you identify what you genuinely admire or what you actually need to improve in yourself. If you're brilliant, but you're constantly failing at practical tasks, you might need to stop focusing on acquiring more knowledge, Kay, and start practicing your smarts.
S. And if you have great smarts, but keep making the same moral mistakes.
Then you need to focus on cultivating wisdom, W, through reflection, which is a painful, slow process. It moves you from a fuzzy assessment to really precise developmental goals.
Okay, moving from that internal clarity to how we interact with the external world, let's talk about something everyone encounters daily, the spectrum of weirdness and norm violation.
Right. So fundamentally, the source material defines weirdness pretty simply. It's just a fundamental deviation from expected social patterns.
And this deviation, crucially, it isn't inherently moral or immoral, is it?
No, it's simply surprising. And the social reaction to that deviation changes dramatically based on the strictness of the environment and, the degree of the norm break. We need the language to articulate those degrees.
And the sources laid out a really powerful 6-stage spectrum of social disruption based on the emotional reaction it pulls from people. It starts mild and escalates to severe.
Yeah. We begin with the accepted forms. So first you have quirky.
Harmless, slightly unusual deviation, like wearing wildly patterned socks to a business meeting. It causes, mild amusement?
Right. Then you have eccentric, which is consistently outside the usual norms, but it's often intriguing. Think of the neighborhood philosopher who only communicates via handwritten notes.
Okay, but then we cross the line into the negative.
We do. Offensive is where the deviation crosses a significant ethical or moral boundary, and that triggers anger or backlash. This is often a conscious norm violation with an intent to annoy or provoke.
Then there's the one that I find really profound. Unsettling or uncanny.
Yes. This is behavior that's just subtly wrong. It's slightly off kilter and it evokes a feeling of dread. It's that feeling that the person is trying a little too hard to be normal and is failing in a way that generates that uncanny valley effect.
That feeling of dread is your system one just screaming, something is wrong with this pattern.
Exactly. And moving further, we hit threatening weirdness. This involves a perceived potential for actual harm. It triggers fear and the fight or flight
Like
response.
erratic, unpredictable behavior in an enclosed public space.
Right. And then at the far end, you have transgressive behavior. This is the deviation that deliberately smashes deep societal taboos, things like cannibalism or incest-provoking horror and universal condemnation.
This spectrum is so vital because it reveals the function of all this social labeling.
So what is that function?
It's boundary setting. It reinforces what's considered normal, not just for safety, but for social cohesion. It's group signaling, determining who belongs and who doesn't. And most importantly, it's a quick moral sorting mechanism.
The brain is constantly asking.
Is this person predictable? Are they safe? We make these fast, often unconscious judgments to determine trust and belonging. And the labeling is massively contextual. What's eccentric in one culture might be threatening in another.
And those fast, often subconscious judgments lead us directly into the cognitive basis for all of this quick judgment. We have to talk about Daniel Kahneman's System 1 and System 2 thinking.
Absolutely, because they explain why we jump to conclusions about someone being weird so quickly.
So System 1 is our operating system for speed. It's fast, intuitive, emotional, automatic, and it relies heavily on pattern recognition. It's the part of your brain that knows to step back from a shadow that looks like a snake before you even consciously identify it.
And System 2, by contrast, is slow.
Slow, deliberate, rational, and it requires effort. It's the part that carefully analyzes data in a spreadsheet. Our quick categorizations about people, including that whole weirdness spectrum, are almost always System 1 in action.
The sources gave the perfect analogy for this, our savanna instincts in the cityscape.
I loved that. The quick categorization system that protected us historically, telling us instantly if someone was friend or foe, safe or dangerous, it now misfires constantly in our complex, diverse, and information-saturated modern society.
Our ancient hardware is struggling to process the complexity of the new environment.
Which means we are constantly making rapid, efficient, but often really inaccurate assessments of other people based on very thin information. So the crucial practice then is developing meta-awareness.
Okay, what does that mean in a practical sense? How do you do that in a heated moment?
You have to recognize that initial jolt of misunderstanding, that System 1 reaction, and you have to pause it before letting System 2 engage.
You need language to name the dynamic.
You do. Instead of defensively retreating or attacking, you try to put a label on the friction itself. You draw attention to the process, not the content. For example, if you feel dismissed, instead of just getting angry, you might say, I get the sense we might be interpreting this situation very differently. I want to unpack that together and find the gap in our understanding.
That is a profound act of intellectual generosity. It's asking, can we talk about how we are talking about this?
It is. It's the only way to move from quick judgment to deliberate understanding.
Okay, that's a perfect frame. Now let's tackle two specific communication friction points we run into every day. First up, the I know challenge. This phrase, it's so common, deceptively simple, but it carries immense social and emotional weight.
Oh, it's a classic conflict over status and belonging. When someone shares information, they are often offering a subtle gift, a means of connection, a piece of what they perceive as value.
And saying I know can feel like you're just rejecting that gift.
Or minimizing the speaker's effort, or, even worse, subtly asserting intellectual superiority. It is rarely about the information itself. It's a flashpoint about the power dynamic.
Right. The listener is trying to avoid feeling underestimated, and the speaker is trying to avoid feeling unheard.
A common scenario, you see it all the time, a manager shares a pretty obvious point with a junior team member, and the junior member immediately snaps back, I know!
And then the manager feels disrespected, and the junior member feels infantilized.
And both are reacting to that underlying insecurity, not the actual fact being shared. The solution is to shift the focus from who knew first, which is a status game, to what else can we explore, which is the collaborative game.
So we need to replace that flat dismissal with practical alternatives that signal respect for the speaker's effort, even if the information is old news to us.
Exactly. We need some curiosity pivots.
So give us some concrete language here. What does that sound like?
Well, instead of that quick, dismissive, I know, you could try acknowledging the information while redirecting the focus, for instance. That's a great reminder. How did you come across that perspective?
Or, yes, that's been on my mind too. What do you think the next logical step is?
Another really powerful pivot is to say, I appreciate you sharing that. What other aspects of this are you thinking about? This validates their initiative while keeping the conversational door wide open and focused on moving forward.
Okay, our second friction point, semantic inflation. This is the phenomenon where the overuse of high-intensity, maximalist words like trauma, toxic, literally epic, disaster.
It just dulls the meaning of our most powerful language. It renders our emotional vocabulary ineffective. It's a genuine linguistic crisis.
How so?
Well, when you use the word trauma to describe something genuinely catastrophic, and I use the word trauma to describe dropping my phone, we lose the capacity to distinguish between the mundane and the momentous.
It skews our emotional scale for reality.
It does, and over time, it chips away at your credibility.
Yeah.
If you constantly speak in high-stakes language, your audience eventually becomes deaf to your real moments of crisis.
It's the linguistic equivalent of keeping the volume maxed out all the time. When you really need to shout, there's nowhere left to go.
Yeah, that's it exactly. So the practical solution is conscious recalibration. We need to swap these inflated words with alternatives that offer more precision and nuance.
So instead of, I literally died laughing,
Yeah.
which is demonstrably false.
And unhelpful, yeah. You say, I genuinely couldn't stop laughing, or I laughed so hard my sides hurt. Instead of labeling a merely difficult colleague as toxic, which is often a clinical term used incorrectly, you could try, this person is often manipulative, or they have a pattern of unreliability.
So precision in language paves the way for precise thinking.
And crucially, it helps others trust the veracity of your emotional experience. We have to avoid stripping our strongest words of their necessary weight. We need those strong tools for when we truly need to articulate a massive difference between a mere inconvenience and an actual emotional catastrophe.
So conserving your high-intensity vocabulary is a form of, what, emotional stewardship.
Emotional stewardship. I like that a lot, yes.
And that brings us neatly to Section 3, where we confront the relational paradox. How our actions, our willingness to be vulnerable, and our response to inevitable disappointment. How they define the quality of our relationships.
Let's start with venting. Tool for self-understanding versus weapon.
So constructive externalizing, or venting, is defined as an intentional, temporary emotional outsourcing.
It's an essential tool, really, for understanding your own reaction, for letting off steam, or for just getting a chaotic thought process out of your head so you can look at it. But crucially, it must be used as a tool for self-understanding, not as a weapon to punish the subject of the complaint.
Okay, so what are the key components of constructive venting?
First, you have to choose the listener wisely, someone you trust to be impartial. Second, you set a clear intention. Is this for relief? Is it for clarity? Or do you actually want a solution?
And you should say that up front. I just need 5 minutes to dump this. Please don't offer solutions.
Right. And third, there needs to be a balancing act with compassion for the subject. Even if the person you're complaining about did something wrong, excessive venting risks erasing their humanity in your mind.
But there are very clear red flags that signal a slide into harmful territory. These are the telltale signs that the venting has become weaponized.
Absolutely. The biggest red flag is repetition without movement. Repeatedly going over the exact same complaint without any effort to change your response or the situation.
Another one is actively rallying troops.
Yeah, trying to get others to agree with your outrage just to validate your anger. The most toxic form, though, is chronic judgment that trains your perception to constantly scan for flaws in others.
That chronic judgment is what the sources call the personal propaganda machine.
Exactly. And it's so toxic because you've created this self-reinforcing loop where your system is trained to prioritize the emotional safety of your narrative. I'm the victim, they are the villain overseeing reality accurately.
You stop seeing nuance.
You become blind to the good qualities of the subject, and you train your brain to expect the worst in every social interaction, creating the self-fulfilling prophecy of disappointment.
Now, let's address the classic cliche. Words versus actions. We all know actions speak louder.
Yeah.
But why? What's really behind that?
Actions speak louder because they represent tangible reality and commitment. Words are cheap. They require minimal effort and really no skin in the game. Actions are costly. They require time, effort, resources, and the willingness to sacrifice comfort.
When someone shows up for you, that is quantifiable proof of their priority.
That's it, which leads directly to the modern paradox we face in relationships.
Hmm.
We often choose comfort over effort.
That feels like the engine of modern relational decline.
It is. Leisure activities, the Netflix marathon, the seamless delivery app, the self-contained digital sphere, they often win out over social obligations that feel effortful, like driving across town to help a friend move.
And this trend is often masked by the concept of self-care being used as justification for social withdrawal.
Right. And the consequence is a normalization of shallowness in trust and community. I mean, meaningful bonds are truly built on the friction of action, on showing up when it's inconvenient, not just on verbal promises.
But the sources also highlight a crucial flip side to this issue, the two-way vulnerability gap.
We talk a lot about how people choose comfort over giving support, but we also, as the potential receivers, withhold the very requests for help that could build closeness.
We fear rejection.
We fear being a burden, or we fear inconveniencing others. And this withholding sabotages the very deep relationships we say we crave. Relationships are built in the exchange of help, in the messiness of mutual inconvenience. But we choose the safer word over the riskier, more rewarding action of asking for or offering help.
So the practical advice here is twofold. Model what you want. Be willing to be inconvenienced for others, and practice directness in stating your own need.
Be vulnerable enough to ask for the inconvenience.
Precisely. If we want genuine connection, we have to expose ourselves to the risk of rejection, both in offering and requesting. That is the price of admission for genuine depth.
It really is.
Next, let's talk about judging others. Accountability versus contempt. The source material cautions strongly against the moral blanket statement of labeling someone bad.
Because almost nobody sees themselves as the villain of their own story.
Right, so simply labeling someone bad is insufficient for understanding and responding effectively.
We need clear lenses to categorize perceived wrongdoing instead of relying on what feels like a moral vacuum cleaner. The sources provided 5 lenses. First, there's moral intent, true cruelty or malice, the desire to cause harm.
Then, character flaw, selfishness, or bad habits that often stem from insecurity or trauma or arrested development. They harm others, but not out of intentional malice.
Third is incompetence, a lack of skill, effort, or foresight. They didn't mean to mess up, they simply lacked the capability.
Fourth, social transgression breaking cultural norms without necessarily causing severe harm, like showing up late to a formal event.
And finally, unreliability breaking trust, inconsistency, or just failing to follow through on promises.
And the ultimate goal here is clarity over contempt. You have to separate the necessary act of accountability, setting firm boundaries, calling out harm, demanding repair, from the corrosive act of contempt.
Which is dehumanizing the person. Contempt is the emotion that sees a person's identity as inextricably linked to their mistake. Clarity allows you to hold the person accountable for their actions while still recognizing the complexity of their character, their possible motivations, and the difference between a one-time failure of competence and a persistent pattern of moral intent.
So you maintain your standards without resorting to hatred.
That is a lifelong practice. It really is.
Finally, in this section, let's address processing disappointment. When trust is broken, it doesn't just make us sad, it triggers our deep emotional defenses.
Anger, cynicism, withdrawal.
Yeah, because disappointment feels like a direct threat to our emotional security. It challenges our judgment and even our identity, leaving us wondering, how could I have been so wrong about this person?
And that anger and cynicism is often a protective mechanism against future pain, but it's fundamentally self-defeating if you take it too far. We need healthier strategies for resilience.
And the sources recommend selective investing.
It's a powerful analogy. Just as you diversify a financial portfolio, you must diversify emotional trust. You don't pour all your resources and your deepest vulnerabilities into unproven relationships.
You invest based on demonstrated consistency and evidence of integrity,
Right.
not just initial charisma.
Exactly. And the second crucial strategy is allowing grief. Disappointment is a genuine loss. It's the loss of an expectation, the loss of a possible future reality you had constructed around that person or project.
So you need personal rituals.
You do, like journaling, quiet reflection, or even a symbolic ceremony to acknowledge and process the loss of that expectation. You cannot heal disappointment by pretending it didn't hurt.
This analysis leads to the framework for navigating the messy reality of human relationships, and it's all encapsulated in that profound summary quote from the source material.
It really serves as the ultimate anchor point for this section. People will disappoint you, you will disappoint yourself. Neither fact needs to destroy your hope, your kindness, or your dignity. Expect imperfection, forgive wisely, invest selectively.
That advice, it acknowledges the reality of human fallibility, both theirs and yours, while prioritizing the preservation of your own character.
Absolutely.
That wisdom is the perfect bridge as we move into our final section, zooming out to section 4. The cultural context. We've talked about our internal architecture and our relational habits, but now we have to look at the macro systems that shape all of this, starting with the myth of common sense.
This is a massive stumbling block in modern communication. The sources assert that common sense is anything but universal or neutral.
It's not common at all, is it?
Not really. It's a heavily filtered product of your unique culture, your personal experiences, your level of education, and your immediate situation. What seems utterly obvious and self-evident to you can be foreign, complex, or just foolish to someone else because their internal map, built from different experiences, is fundamentally different.
And the danger, as the old saying goes, is the assumption projecting your map onto others and believing your reality is the reality that everyone must share.
And that leads to profound frustration when they inevitably deviate from your map. We need to reframe this entirely. Treat common sense not as an expectation you hold others accountable to.
But as a conversation starter.
Yes. When someone responds unexpectedly, cultivate curiosity instead of judgment. Instead of thinking, that's so stupid, why did they do that? Try thinking, I wonder what experience shaped their response that way. What data do they have that I'm missing?
It moves you from judging their failure to being genuinely curious about their framework.
Exactly.
And this complexity is compounded by the feeling that our society is just incredibly complex and confusing right now. And the sources detail why, laying out the 6 fractures of the modern self.
These are the underlying systems that create pervasive epistemic insecurity and moral confusion today.
So let's detail these and their strategies for coping. First fracture.
Attention. It's been atomized by algorithms that are designed for maximum engagement, and that fractures our focus into these tiny micro-moments. The symptom is chronic distractibility and an inability to sustain deep, focused work.
And the strategy has to be reclaiming attention as a sacred resource. Constantly asking yourself, what is truly worthy of my attention right now, and what is merely demanding it?
Second, trust. It has eroded in traditional institutions, government, media, even expert opinion due to repeated failures and visible contradictions. And this has been replaced by vibes-based trust.
Trust based purely on shared emotional resonance or a gut feeling within self-selected digital tribes.
The problem with vibes-based trust is its fragility. It collapses the moment the vibe changes. The strategy is to build conscious trust hierarchies based on demonstrated consistency and integrity over time, not just charisma or ideological alignment.
Third fracture, authenticity. The pressure to be authentic has completely backfired.
It really has. Identity has been transformed into a continuous performance, a curated vulnerability that's necessary for building a personal brand and maintaining engagement online.
And the symptoms are rampant imposter syndrome, the feeling that your performance will be revealed as fake, and a paralyzing fear of being canceled or judged for making a single mistake.
Fourth is belonging. It has become hyper-personal, focused only on my brand, my journey, or vaguely global, connecting only with online tribes. We're lacking that vital middle layer of local civic identity, the low-stakes community that used to provide meaning outside of work and family.
Fifth is agency. There's a widespread erosion of the belief that individual actions can truly make a difference against massive systemic problems.
And this is often replaced by simulated agency. You see it in video games or apps that offer a feeling of control, progress, and immediate feedback, which real life often denies us.
And the final fracture, narrative. The shared cultural story is fractured into what's called narrative pluralism.
Thousands of competing worldviews and moral frameworks, all readily available online. This results in profound existential confusion and a desperate reliance on micro-narratives and meme ideologies that offer quick, clear, but often simplistic answers to very complex problems.
The world is too big, so we cling to small, coherent stories.
That's it.
That is a staggering list of challenges. But the sources don't leave us without hope. They point to reclaiming connection through the revival of third spaces.
Right. So third spaces are defined as public places between work, your first space, and home, your second space. Think cafes, libraries, public parks, hobby groups.
They're crucial because they foster belonging without obligation.
Exactly. They allow for low-stakes social exposure, where you can just practice being a human without the pressure of having to perform your professional or familial roles.
And the sources reveal a fascinating detail about group dynamics here, calling it the Goldilocks zone for building actual ties. It's not about huge crowds or intimate pairs.
No, the sweet spot for repetition, familiarity, and building community is roughly 20 to 40 people. That cohort size balances enough variety to be interesting with enough repetition for recognition.
If you see the same 30 people every week at the pottery studio or the Sunday market, low-stakes bonds just form naturally.
You do, but to reclaim these spaces, it requires significant shifts in mentality.
We have to move from debate to dialogue. We have to aim for genuine insight, understanding, and complexity, not just winning an argument or scoring political points.
And critically, shifting from cynicism to curiosity. We must actively replace the impulse to immediately judge and dismiss a differing viewpoint with the impulse to wonder what experiences, what fractures, or what missing pieces of information shaped that person's view.
Curiosity is the cure for the isolation bred by judgment.
It is.
Finally, let's look at the meta-conflict that informs both our professional drive and our self-care culture, balancing innovation and stewardship. This is the tension at the heart of modern life.
So innovation, what we commonly call hustle culture, it provides the necessary engine, the drive for survival, agency, breakthrough. It pushes us forward. But if innovation is left unchecked,
It risks profound burnout, systemic exploitation, and structural collapse.
yeah.
We just keep building until the foundations fail.
And stewardship, what we often call self-care culture, provides the guardrails: rest, quality control, preservation of human well-being, and maintenance. But taken to an extreme, it risks stagnation.
Paralyzing indecision and reinforcing old, often unequal power structures by refusing necessary change.
So the synthesis, therefore, is guided innovation. It's not about choosing one over the other. It's about integrating stewardship, the guardrails of rest, ethical standards, well-being, into the very design of our systems, our culture, and our personal lives.
You stop treating self-care as an afterthought or an indulgence you squeeze in only when you hit a wall.
Self-care and sustainability must be structurally built into the system that drives the hustle. The engine has to be designed with an efficient cooling system and a sustainable fuel source.
Absolutely. Innovation gives us the raw power to move forward. Stewardship gives us the steering wheel, the brakes, and the long-term map. You need both working seamlessly to get anywhere safely and sustainably.
Personally or corporately?
What an incredible journey we've taken. From mapping the complex inner world with subpersonalities to navigating the external cultural landscape defined by broken systems and this tension between hustle and rest.
True mastery, as we've seen, it doesn't lie in eliminating this complexity. It's about navigating it with profound intentionality and precise language.
And that intentionality brings us back to the guiding philosophy for the deep self,
Yeah.
intentional transparency.
Right. The healthiest state is being open enough to connect meaningfully, offering calibrated vulnerability to build trust and find resonance, but, and this is key, remaining private enough to stay whole, centered, and authentic.
So privacy, in this sense, isn't just secrecy.
No, it's a sacred space for your own necessary internal development and reflection, free from the demands of the constant external performance.
Yeah, it feels like the right anchor point for our personal strategy. So, for our final provocative thought for you, the listener, we want to synthesize two crucial pieces of wisdom: the competition cooperation model and the platinum rule.
Growth and healthy relationships require us to consciously choose where we want to operate on our own moral compass. Are we going north? Healthy competition, assertion; south, toxic competition, aggression; east, healthy cooperation, mutual aid; or west, toxic cooperation, people-pleasing, self-erasure.
And the deepest challenge is ensuring that your choice of direction, whether you assert your inner Liz or yield to your inner Kelly, is guided by the highest moral wisdom.
Because it can be so easy to default to the direction that offers the most immediate comfort.
Right. So we'll leave you with this question. When you make that choice, that crucial shift in mindset, are you applying the wisdom of the platinum rule, treating others how they want to be treated, which requires knowing and respecting their internal map? Or are you simply defaulting to what is easiest and most comfortable for you?
That alignment of internal strategy with external ethical wisdom, that is the true measure of skillful living.